Here on the Colour of Country Life, FlowFM across regional Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia. Dr. Constantin Seidl joins us. He's from the University of Adelaide School of Economics and Public Policy. He's from the Applied Water and Agricultural Economist field. How are you, Dr. Seidl?
Good to be with you.
Now, the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, we've been talking about it a lot here on FlowFM, and this deadline of 2024 that has been approaching. There's plenty of commentary around this. Just broadly, how are you seeing, first of all, the health of the basin itself?
I think the health of the basin has recovered mainly due to the good rains we had in the last few months. But overall, there's a lot more to be done, particularly since more water could be recovered for the environment, because drought will come back.
And that's the key point, I think, of where the federal government's going and the talk about buybacks from farmers so that there is more water for the environment. I know there's a lot of talk about efficiency projects. What is the best approach that you're seeing in terms of, I guess, getting better environmental outcomes with water?
So there's a lot of work been done on this, as I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware, and there's a lot of commentary on this. From an economic perspective, the best bang for your buck, so to speak, is buying water directly from willing sellers. The rural communities are often very divided on this point of view because they feel that water buyback moves water out of irrigation communities and leads to rural decline. But the scientific publications out there show that there's many drivers leading to job losses and rural decline, for example, like global price pressures and modernization of farming. So it's not just as easy to just blame buybacks, and I think it's just the best spent for your money, really.
When it comes to buybacks, I want to try and mint a term here, fractional buyback. Is there a case for buying some of the water off of a farmer where they continue farming but they just find a more efficient way of continuing?
Absolutely, and this is what we've seen historically with the first buyback program, that actually the majority of farmers who sold entitlements to the government only sold partially of their entitlement and also often continued farming after that. So a lot of people made use of this opportunity to potentially retire some farm debt or get some cash they wanted to spend on upgrading the shed or upgrading the tractor, and looked hard at their business, said, we don't need all this water. This is a good way for us to get some extra cash.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where maybe sometimes the talk about buyback in rural communities latches onto the idea of a farm being mothballed. But is that what you've observed in the real terms, is that what actually tends to happen is the farm doesn't close, it just finds a better way of operating?
Absolutely, that's what we've observed mostly, and it gives people really the capital to also modernize their systems of production or switch crops if they wish to, or facilitate succession planning as well. So overall, we don't really see a reduction in farming area across the basin. Sure, there might be different experiences in particular communities on a localized scale, but overall it's not that the amount farmed has contracted by a huge amount because water was brought back. It's rather you saw different crops enter the market, such as almonds or citruses coming back as well, and generally production got a lot more efficient.
Now, you're a water and agricultural economist. I know that when it comes to this additional 450 gigalitres that's being pursued to largely, as it's said, to be sent down to South Australia for environmental purposes, there's this triple bottom line test of ensuring there are no negative social, environmental or economic outcomes of this. There's been debate about whether that test should be scrapped or not. Just where do you think that, is that a constructive test to have in the basin?
So originally that test looked at outcomes overall, right? So you were able to, so to speak, make somebody a little bit worse off if you made somebody else better, and that compensated for the negative hit, so to speak, right? So if the improvement was a lot better, that was fine. And a few years ago, the states agreed to change that nobody can face any disadvantages from any projects whatsoever, which essentially makes it really, really hard, because whenever you try to change something, somebody will be negatively impacted, even if it's just a little bit. So I don't think it's really helpful, that current structure as it is. And this is also why South Australia has recently chosen to not support this test anymore, because it makes it almost impossible to recover any more water, as you could imagine, because somebody's always going to be impacted. And if you have to make sure that nobody has any negative effect whatsoever, it's essentially putting a stop to any project.
Yeah, so I guess to paraphrase that, you're saying the test has gone from a more winners than losers approach to a no losers approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Now, just on this Basin Plan and where we're travelling towards, there's been a lot of commentary about New South Wales and its water sharing plans and whether it's dragging its feet in this regard. How are you seeing it? I mean, the Basin Authority gave a pretty negative report card on New South Wales' progress on getting, I guess, its house in order when it comes to making sure it's getting the right amount of water down the river.
Yeah, New South Wales has been historically pretty resistant to recovering water from its communities in general. I mean, there were delays as well, given that they had the Northern Basin review and changed the amount of water they want to recover in the Northern Basin as well. But in a sense, you could say they weren't very willing from the get-go, and that has led to all sorts of delays in the way they drafted their water sharing plans. A lot of them were of really poor quality, so the Murray-Darling Basin Authority essentially sent them back to them and said, no, you have to do better. So I think now I've heard that the New South Wales government is really trying harder to get their house in order, but there have been historically quite political and cultural problems in that state, and that's why they're so far behind.
Now, just lastly, there's been conversation from some farming communities in particular about this. They call it, look, we can't just add water to get environmental outcomes. They're critical of, the buyback of water, growing the environmental water holders portfolio as somehow just a magic way of fixing the environment. I mean, is it a fair criticism, or is it absolutely critical that water is the key element to improve ecological outcomes in the basin?
From what I'm not an ecologist, but from what I know about the balance of the published science, it is largely that water quantity is a key driver for environmental outcomes. Now, I want to give credit to the Commonwealth Environmental Water here because they are really creative and really successful in how they manage their portfolio to create environmental outcomes with the water they've got available. So they're really doing a good job, but I feel that sometimes there's just no other option than having more water to reach these really high floodplain areas where all the black box are, for example.
All right, well, we're out of time. It'd be good to keep talking about this topic, but it is going to be going on for some time, and it is complex. Dr. Constantin Seidl from University of Adelaide, thanks so much for your time with us today on Flow.
Thank you so much. A pleasure.